So a while ago, I mentioned that I had an album coming out. I've had a few singles out from it since then, and the release is now officially scheduled for March 24, so coming very soon. I wanted to take a little bit of time just to talk about what sets it apart from my prior work, what makes it interesting and exciting, and why you should check it out. Now, I like music that's sonically rich and lyrically evocative in an elusive sort of way, and, sophisticated in a way that enhances the emotional complexity of it. And, with this album, I think I've found new ways to balance those things. And this album's a departure for me in that I wrote most of it on acoustic guitar, and I think that's resulted in a really effective balance of complexity and accessibility. I picked up some basic acoustic guitar in my teens and 20s, but I kind of have this middle block where I get very impatient with learning an instrument because I really just want to jump to the writing stage. And in my early 30s, I forced myself to take piano lessons, began actually trying to learn scales and exercises and cover songs, and, to spend some time on those things and get to know the instrument in that sense before I tried to begin writing. And when COVID happened, it felt like an opportunity to apply that same line of thought to guitar, right? So, when everything shut down, I had the opportunity to spend, sometimes hours a day, learning scales, practicing scales, chords, chord theory, cover songs. And that impetus lasted until about November 2020, which is really the point where I was no longer able to restrain the impulse to write and where some of these songs kind of started to take shape. Now, that's actually not that long a period of time to really even begin to learn an instrument. So in a lot of ways, I'm still a very inexperienced guitarist. And I've never really had, honestly, that much ambition or drive as a player, right? I mean, with any instrument, I'm much more interested in writing, composition, production, arrangement. And, so the end result, I think, because I never got that sophisticated as a guitarist, the end result is a set of songs that are somewhat more stripped down than the last couple albums. They're a little bit more vocally based. They're a little bit more song-oriented. Fundamentally, I think they're catchier and simpler. But at the same time, I still have that urge and that interest toward things that have a little bit of a journey to them and kind of a front to back structure that's more complex than just verse, chorus, verse. I want things to have distinct intros and codas. I want them to take a few twists and turns. I want the piece to finish in a distinctly different place than it began. The other big change is, there's quite a lot of live instrumentation. There's more room for the individual styles of players, which means a greater range of sounds and textures and styles. I realized in the course of making this album that if I'm smart about it, if I'm judicious about the use of it, if I'm thoughtful about how I describe things to people, I can hire some pretty great session musicians on a hobbyist budget. So almost every song on here has live strings or backing singers or a really good live bassist or, at least one or two elements that really bring some color and life that a virtual instrument might not have. I'm also really proud of how the vocals have come out here. Like I mentioned before, I've used backing and guest singers to a much greater extent in a way that expands the range of vocal sound and texture. And I think I've personally gotten a lot better at using what is admittedly a relatively limited instrument. I think the vocal style on my albums confuses people sometimes because a lot of the instrumental textures and styles are very rooted in progressive rock. Most of the marketing that I do is toward fans of progressive rock, but it's not really a prog rock vocal style. I like having something with some rasp and some crack and some weariness and, something that kind of uses those traits to expand the emotional character of the song. If I could magically have somebody's voice come out of my mouth, I'd much sooner pick, Mark Lanegan than John Anderson. And this is a very vocally centered album, and that kind of terrified me when I started making it. But, I think as the performances developed, as I got to know the songs, it's come out much stronger than the last few albums in that regard. I've been sitting here talking this album up, or trying to talk this album up, and the more I talk, the less I feel like I'm actually doing an effective job, especially with like 1 million songs an hour being uploaded to Spotify and people having all the recorded music ever in history readily at their grasp. And, also every type of entertainment you can possibly imagine. And I'm sitting here saying, hey, I wrote it on a guitar. The vocals are on key. There's some instruments on it, right? Like fucking hell. How do you sell an album to somebody in 2023? How can you? I don't know. I don't know if you can.